So in today's video, we will take a look on the new Next.js form component. So if you aren't familiar, the form component was just released in the Next.js 15. And as we can see here, it extends the HTML form element and provides prefetching and loading UI, client-side navigation on submission, and progressive enhancements. And it's useful for forms that update URL in search params, as it reduces the boilerplate code needed to achieve the above that we just mentioned. So in this video, let's actually take a quick look on how to use the form component and a couple of different scenarios that we can play around with. So let's start by opening up our VS Code. So over here, I have a fresh Next.js project ready. And what I'm going to do first is just create this kind of search page. So we have a form that is a search form. You can type in a keyword, and when you submit it, it will take you to the results page. So let's start by adding a new folder and file to this app folder. I'm going to call it search form/page.js. And let me add some code over here, and let's go through it then together like this. So what I'm doing here is just adding some Tailwind CSS classes for styling for each of these elements. But the main thing here is that we are using the form component from the Next form. And we can provide an action prop for it. And in this case, it will be /search. And then inside of the form, we have the input, the text input over here for the query param, and then a submit button. So this is all we need for our form right now. And next, let's make this search page. So I'm gonna create a new folder in the app folder called search and add a page in it. And again, let me add some code in here and let's go through it together like this. So what's happening here is that we have the search page component. Then we are getting the query parameter, or the Q as we named it over here. So it's this input value, and we are getting it from the search params. And then this is just to simulate something you would do. So over here, you would call an API, for example, but just for the example, this is a mock function. So this returns 3 results for the query parameter. And it will wait 1 second, so just to simulate the loading of the data. So we are calling this getResults function inside of the component, and then we get the results. And then we are just displaying the actual value of the query param or the search term over here. And then we are looping through the results and displaying them over here. And we have added some Tailwind CSS classes for styling. All right, so let's save this and fire up our dev server and then go to our form. Okay, so we are at localhost 3000/search form. And let me just open up the dev tools and let's test this out. So if I type in here and click search, it will take me to the /search page with the query parameter appended to the URL. So it's the ASDF, and then we are getting the results over here. So what this form component does is its behavior basically depends on the action prop. So it can be a string or a function. And in our case, it was a string. It was the /search. So when action is a string, the form behaves like a native HTML form that uses a get method. The form data is encoded into the URL, as we could see over here. It's over there, the form data. We only had one field there, but if there was multiple fields, they would be here also. URL as a search params, and when the form is submitted, it navigates to the specified URL. So as we could see, it navigated to the /search page. In addition, we also get prefetching, so it prefetches the path when the form becomes visible. This preloads the shared UI, for example, layout or loading.js, resulting in a faster navigation. And it also performs a client-side navigation instead of a full-page reload when the form is submitted. And this retains shared UI and client-side state. So if you are familiar with the native HTML form, when you submit it, it will make a full page reload, but with this form component, we get the client-side navigation instead of the full page reload, which is good in my opinion, because most of the time, especially with Next.js, client-side navigation is the way you want to go. Of course, depending on the situation. And then if the action is a function, so we had it as a string, but if it was a function, the form behaves like a React form, executing the action when the form is submitted. So basically, if it's a function, it is a server action that will be executed when it is submitted. So let's see an example of that in just a bit. But before that, let's actually try and see if the prefetching works for the form component. So what I'm going to do here is add layout and loading.js for our search form. Because if you noticed, if we go back to the form and search something, it takes a little while to load, and that is because we had the sleep or timeout over here, which demonstrates the time that it takes to load some records from an API, for example, or database. So now when we click the search, you can see it takes a bit time to load, and then it displays the whole page. So let's click it. And it took about 1 second, and then it showed this. So what we actually want to do is show some loading indicator over here when the data is loading, and load the layout, for example, for this page before that. So let's see how that is done. So I'm going to add a layout file over here and add some code for it like this. So what we're doing here is just adding a header for the page and then displaying the other contents of the page. And I'm going to also add a loading.js over here and add some code to it like this. So we are just displaying a loading search results text when the data is loading. So now let's see what happens if we make a search. So I'm going to refresh the page and I'm clearing the dev tools. And now if I make a search and let's see what happens. I click the search now. You can see it displayed the layout, so the heading for the page right away. And it showed the loading search results over here, as long as it took to load this search results or search page component. So that's good. But the documentation also said about prefetching. So let's see if it actually does the prefetching. So I'm going to go back to the search form, refresh this, clear the dev tools. And now if I hard refresh this page, so I'm going to click Command-Shift-R, we can see we get the search form over here and then some other stuff, but we are actually not getting the /search page. So it's something to remember if you are testing preloading or prefetching. And that is that in development server, the prefetching is not happening. So it's only happening in production. So in order to simulate the production, we need to build our application and start it. So let's do that. So I'm going to stop the dev server and then build this. And once that's run, let's start the server with yarn start. Like this. So now if we open up our localhost, I'm going to clear the dev tools again. And now I'll refresh the page. We can see we get the search form as before, but we also get the search page. As we can see here, localhost 3000/search. So it's prefetching that page. And for that page right now, it prefetched the layout file, this one, and the loading.js. So when we hit the search button now, it will show the layout and the loading indicator much faster because they are prefetched. And of course, in our example, these aren't too complicated or big files, the loading.js or layout.js. But you might have an application that these are much bigger and maybe even load some data in them. So by prefetching them, the navigation will be much faster. So let's try it out. I'm going to make a search, click search. And as we can see, it instantaneously showed the search page title, which came from the layout.js, and then the loading indicator. And once the data was loaded, it showed the search results. Okay, so that's how you can use the form component with a string as an action prop. But what about the function? So as we could read here, the action can also be a function, which will be server action. So let's try that out. And the way we are going to test this is by creating a to-do form that you can input the to-do text and then click save, and it will take you to a new page where that to-do is shown. So not the best UX for to-do application, but just to demonstrate the logic and how this form works, we're going to do that right now. So I'm going to switch back to the VS Code, and I'm going to create a new folder and file over here called to-do form, like this, and I'll add some code into it like this. So let's go through it together. So we have the page component in this route, and inside of it we have some styling with Tailwind CSS for all the components. But then we are importing the form, and now instead of the action being string, we pass a function for it called add to do. And this is a server action which is defined over here. And what it right now does is just gets the text value, so the input we have over here, the value from this input, it gets that and redirects the user to /todos/ the text of the to-do. So in real world, you would save your to-do in here and do some other stuff, but just to demonstrate how this works, we are going to just redirect the user to the /todos/ the to-do text. And inside the form, we have a header, and then we have one input, which was the text of the to-do, and then an add to-do button, which will submit the form. So let's save this. And what I'm going to do still is add this /todos page so we can see the to-do text where this redirects us to. So I'm going to add a new folder and file to the app directory like this. So todos /slug/ page.js. And let me add some code in it like this. So we are getting the slug from the URL params over here, and then just displaying that in here, just to demonstrate how this works. So switch to the localhost 3000, and I'm going to navigate to our to-do form, and it looks like we get 404. Oh, yeah, we had the production build of our server running, so I'm going to stop that and start the dev server like this. And now let's open up the to-do form. Okay, now we get it. So let's open up the dev tools, and okay, so we have the input over here. So I'm going to add some text to it like this. And now when we click the add to do, let's see what happens. Looks like it submits the form and takes us to the /todos/ the to-do text URL, and we can see the to-do text over here. So what happens here when we click the add to do button? Again, the form over here is submitted, and since we are passing the add to do function, the server action for the action prop, this server action is then run, and in the real world you would save your to do in this action and then redirect the user or update the list of the to-dos or something like that. But in our case now, we are just getting the to-do text from the form data. So again, since this form is submitted and this is a server action, it gets as parameter the form data, so everything this form had. And then we are redirecting the user to the /todos/text. So there you go. That's at least two ways you could use the new Next.js form component. I really hope you found this video at least somewhat helpful. And if you did, I think you could also enjoy my Next.js newsletter, where I share more about Next.js and some exclusive content also that I don't talk about anywhere else. So I'll leave a link down the description so you can sign up for free.